This is an exploded view of two boots that are fairly similar, but different enough that I think it was worth dissecting them and showing the pros and cons and kind of how we started with the AR8 pattern and slowly developed into the rugged trooper, or just the trooper pattern, I guess. Because they do look similar, you know? It's like wide toe box boot, 8 inches, but there's some distinct differences. And I think they're best explained maybe with the cut in half. We might cut this one in half to do like a different version where you can see the full cross sections. But this is a fun way to do it, and I thought it fit for Rose Anvil too. And it's, you know, it's just as much for me as it is for you guys, because I like looking at like, okay, how far did we actually go? Like, let's see what this ended up like. Let's see what are the real differences. And, you know, just off the bat, just looking at the two boots, you can see there's some differences in the pattern right off the bat. You know, you've got on this, you zoom in now that we've seen the full exploded view. So one of the small things that I think makes a big difference in how these boots look is in the pattern, just in this sweep alone. You can see this is brought out more. It's a little less long because we brought this back, and this goes pretty far down the toe. It sweeps up a little bit more like American style boot patterns. And another big one is obviously the heel and the backstay. Because on the AR8, you've got a single piece backstay and heel counter, external heel counter, with no pull loop. You've got this little tab there. I think you can run your laces through it is the idea. And then on this one, we put a traditional big pull loop on there, reinforced with some nylon strap. And obviously it's a 2-piece counter. And then another big one, pretty clear off the bat, is the padded collar on the AR8 and the more traditional lack of padded collar on the trooper pattern. And then another one is, you know, we got the 4 speed hooks with the top eyelet on the trooper pattern and 3 speed hooks on the AR8 pattern. And another big one that's hard to see is right here at the toe, this little part that has a little horseshoe shape that'll show in the pattern better. But, you know, like if you look at those two, you're like, well, those look pretty similar. Like, what's the difference between these two? You know, like, why would I get one versus the other? What are the benefits? What are the pros? What are the cons? Why did we even design this boot if Jim Green already had this one? Well, let's start looking at the pattern, and I'll show you, because there is quite a bit of difference. And I was gonna prep and overlay these to see, because I've done this before during the patterning process and the prototyping. So we did like 12 different prototypes with this, but I haven't done it with the final one. And so that's what I'm excited to do for myself too. So yeah, let's start with the Vamp. Vamp will be a good one, because that's one of the big differences that was a really good learning moment for me. Because you know, as you're reviewing footwear and stuff, you're always trying to like improve your knowledge base, and there's only so much you can learn until you actually start designing footwear and you start working with these brands and tweaking patterns millimeter by millimeter to get to perform exactly how you want. That's where I've learned a lot. So this is actually let's start with the AR8 pattern. So this is the AR8 Vamp, and you can see, especially right here, a little bit of a swoop up there, but then you compare it to the Trooper pattern. Very different. You can see how much higher up on your instep that sits. So that the reason we did that was right here with that line right there, with all that stitching there, it creates a little bit of a pressure point there. But when you have a fully gusseted tongue like this one is, and you want to triple fold it or you want to fold it in somehow, having this bigger sweep allows to have a little bit of extra room right here in this valley to fold the leather in, and that's a lot more like a Pacific Northwest boot. And so since we're doing that fully full length tongue, we did that pattern or that pattern adjustment, and it makes a difference. I really like how it feels. You can feel a difference. You can feel there's no pressure point there. I like the look of it, and I think it improved the pattern. And it's not to say that this AR8 is a bad pattern by any means, but it's a different type of pattern, because even if you look at the quarters, which is another big change, you know, we went a lot more traditional in terms of like size and how it hugs your foot and what the purpose of that instep area is for. Because if you look at the AR8, when you cinch these down, they're pretty much like touching on most people that wear them. You know, it's a very big quarter. So when you really tie them down, you end up with the quarters touching almost all the way up the boot. Versus American boot making, or American like work boot style, is having that big gap all the way up the front. It allows you to cinch it down when you need, loosen it when you don't. It doesn't have as much binding over top of your instep for hiking and a lot of heavier duty work. And so we minimize that quarter by a decent amount. So we'll see how much. It's easier if I put this on. Actually, you know what I should do? This will make this easier. How about some super heavy canvas? This stuff is for a potential project, and this stuff is ridiculous. It's 1.6 millimeters thick of just canvas. Like there's no lining. That's like thicker than sneaker leather in just some canvas. So I like this canvas a lot. It's gonna be a cool project if we get it done. Okay, that is a little better, yeah. So, looking at the quarter panels, if I line these back seams up, the first thing you're gonna notice here is, obviously, this has that collar taken out of it. But if I line up the bottom here with the top there, you can see that's like a 1/4 inch that we brought that whole backstay in because I wanted it to grip your heel really well. You know, because this kind of boot, you want that cinching to happen right here. And with this big of a boot, it can be really hard, and with this big of a pattern, to get that cinching right across your instep. And so to do that, we brought in the backstay area so that you have a little bit of a contour that's gonna grip your ankle more. And then if you look up higher into the pattern, and honestly, it's more than a 1/4 inch. It's closer to like 3/8, or I don't know, millimeters for you millimeter guys. But then if you look here, that's like a 1/2 inch removed from a 1/4. You know, because if you look here, 1/4 inch here, 1/2 inch there, that's a 1/2 inch removed total out of the back, because you take 1/4 inch each side. And then in the front of the 1/4, 1/2 inch. So we reduced the whole gap and the whole circumference of the 1/4 by 1 inch, which it still sounds like it's a small amount. But 1 inch is a lot when it comes to footwear design, because people are tweaking things millimeter by millimeter, and 1 inch is like 25, 26 millimeters. And we took it out of the front and the back. And so that's why this boot really hugs your leg and your ankle and really like cinches you into the boot, because we made the room to be able to cinch it down. And that's one of the biggest changes, is right here. And it feels different. And then obviously, you know, the cutout's different. The speed hook and eyelet setup is different, you know. And then you can see that pattern difference in the swoop right here, just to give it a little different aesthetic and to bring back that 1/4 a little bit more, so that you get, you know, a 1/2 inch roughly removed there, which removes a little bit of room right here, you know, maybe 1/4 inch. And then that sweeps up a lot higher, just giving it a different aesthetic. And it sounds like it's small, but you know, you go through 20 different prototypes, or 10, that's exaggeration, 10 different prototypes to get to the point where you're like, it took 1 inch out of this to make it fit exactly how we wanted. And then, let's see, what else? The boot breaker system has been the surprise success of all the products that we launched this year. And I think it's because it was needed. You know, I think people really, really needed this thin little 2 millimeter bit of foam that just helps you break in your boots, adds a little bit of squish to your heritage boots without changing your size, without destroying any of the value that you get from a heritage boot. And somehow nobody did it. And because of that, we expanded out into some leather boot breakers, because people are like, make it out of leather. So we could do that. We got the dies. People are like, we want a thicker one. And I was like, I do too, actually, because like we could use a little thicker one. And then people are like, we want an even thicker one. Give us a big old mattress to put in our boots. And I was like, we could probably find it, and you're in luck, because we sourced this thick mattress of an insole. If you want tons of squish in your shoes or boots, or you want to take up a ton of room and have a lot of squish, if you want to run like a little thin leather insole on top of a lot of squish, you can combine the two. And that's kind of been the fun of the boot breaker system, is it's half driven by what you guys want and what you see is needed. Because honestly, I thought this was the only thing we were going to launch, and now we've launched 3 different thicknesses of leather and now 3 different thicknesses of foam, because they seem to be useful. And I think sometimes when it comes to product design, simplicity rules overall. Sometimes you just don't need to overdo it. Sometimes there's a simple need in the market, and that's exactly what the boot breakers were. So check them out below, check out the new super thick daddies, and add some squish to your life, add a little heritage to your life, and check them out below. And then I guess speaking of the quarters, one thing that's very different from the AR8 compared to the Trooper pattern, or I guess the Trooper, or the Rugged Trooper specifically, is the AR8 is completely unlined. You don't have any, well, the quarter's completely unlined. There's no lining in the quarter whatsoever, whereas the Rugged Troopers, we line the entire boot with the lining leather. So that up the quarters, as you can see here, you've got that extra rigidity, you've got that extra durability, it's gonna grip your leg better, it's gonna be more durable, it's gonna be more puncture resistant. It's just a beefier version by lining that leather. And it's pretty straightforward. You know, there's nothing much more to it. It makes it an inch and a quarter thicker, like 1.2, 1.5 millimeters thicker just by having the lining, and it makes a difference. You know, like this is the worst way to show flexibility, but it's the best I got. Versus the AR8, you know, it's just a little more malleable and floppy because you don't have that as lined. And you can see here, there's a stitch line there, and what that is the internal counter cover, because we wanted to really secure that ankle and that heel especially. And since Jim Green, they can't really get they can't get veg tan counter material right now in South Africa. They have to do the thermoplastic stuff. And so to beef that up, make sure it doesn't split, make sure it grips your heel enough and gives you enough support, we lined it and we put in an internal counter cover right there that's stitched in. So you've got more layers of leather, more grip, more actual like material to wear through before you like wear out the inside of your boot. And then obviously on the outside is where you had the 2-piece heel counter. Maybe it's better this way. For the AR8, you've got the 1-piece heel counter and backstay. With the trooper pattern, you've got the backstay piece and the heel counter. And you know, it's mostly aesthetic. You know, obviously the pull loop's gonna give you some difference, but there is one functional thing about having a 2-piece one that I really like, is it creates a break point in the flex, so that you, instead of it breaking in random spots where it's gonna crumple over your Achilles tendon and hopefully grip your boot, or your ankle, your foot, your leg, this compresses at a specific spot, gripping your heel a little bit better. It's mostly for looks and for the pull tab, but it does make a functional difference. But the trade-off of that is it will be a little bit tender when you're starting to break it in, because it's going to push a little bit more on your heel. But over time, it should prevent some extra heel slip. Then if we look at the tongue, pretty quick one. You know, you can see really the difference in how that the vamp comes up between these two. So you can see how much more this one arches up. Same here, how shallow that one is. Just a difference. It allows that, so you can see even where this has been folded, because it attaches like this. It really attaches like this. When you go to fold that tongue, it will pinch into that corner and create a lot more comfort. And this still achieves that to some degree, because it still has that little sweep up, and so you can see there's still some like lines of where it's been folded. But having this high of an arch really emphasizes it and allows it to have a little pathway for the tongue to fold. Because you can see exactly, it folded exactly where it should have. You can see exactly how this tongue folded up. So whoever wore these was doing like a accordion kind of fold, rather than like a true like tri-fold of a Pacific Northwest boot, because a more Pacific Northwest fold is more like that. You know, you're coming over top all the way. But it helps, clearly. One thing that's the same is the insole. It's just a Jim Green insole. One thing that's very different is the other insole, the permanent insole that the boot has lasted around. You can see with the Jim Green, you get that veg tan insole. It's actually pretty soft. It's gonna be like pretty easy to break in, gives you a nice footprint pretty quickly. Versus the AR8s, you know, it's a more affordable boot. It's built more like the rest of Jim Green's boots, where you've got this fiber board as the insole underneath of the removable insoles. And then the Trooper has that big piece of edge tan. And differences are, you know, this obviously is not leather, and so it doesn't compress as much the shape of your foot. It's not going to be as durable, and it's obviously, as I was pointing this out, you can see how important that fiber structure in leather is, because I was trying to rip this thing apart without tearing it, but you can see it tore out more than it stayed together. Whereas this leather, I could depend on this as a handle to just rip the insole out. And so there is a difference in durability. And is it enough that you're like, never buy this? No, because it's a price difference. And you know, to some degree, Jim Green has chosen specific materials that simulate leather, because it's a really fibery material. Same thing with this material underneath of the insole, which on the AR8s is their fibrous material. And the stuff adheres really, really well. And I was not going to try to get it off. And they don't have to use a midsole. Versus the Troopers, to make it even beefier, even more heritage, like as much leather as we can, we did an entire full-length veg tan midsole. And then underneath the midsole, you have a rubber slip sole. So on the AR8, you have the fiberboard-ish permanent insole. Then you have the fiberboard-ish kind of, I don't know what they call it, fibrous midsole, and then you have the outsole. With the Troopers, you've got the veg tan permanent insole, you've got the veg tan midsole, you've got the rubber slip sole, and the rubber outsole. And so you've got a couple different extra layers that give it more rigidity. You know, like this is still a pretty rigid boot, but this one's a good amount more rigid. And because it's leather, it's nice because it will break in and you'll maintain a lot of that rigidity, but it will loosen up because those fibers in the leather will start loosening up. But that's a pretty significant difference between the two. They both have a Vamp liner. I don't know if I covered that or not, but there's really no difference there. Just two thinner linings, similar enough materials, and there's not enough difference to really point to one thing to the other. And they both have their thermoplastic counters in the toe and the heel. So that's all the panels. I think we hit it all. So what are the main differences in terms of you as a consumer? Why would you want one or the other? What's the pros and cons versus one or the other? Well, obviously the AR8's more affordable. It might be a little more comfortable around the collar because you have that padded collar. It's going to be a little bit lighter, more flexible. It's going to be a little less heritage in terms of like how it breaks into the shape of your foot. It's not going to give you that same glove-like footprint you get from all of this leather stacked up, but it's a lot more affordable. You know, and a lot of people that are looking for affordable work boots, they want a resolable work boot. And all these non-leather materials don't make this resolable. It's just as resolable. You can have it resoled just as easily. Leather's better in a few different ways, but when it comes to resoling, Jim Green has chosen really good materials that make this traditional built with materials that simulate heritage materials like leather and still can be resoled like heritage boots, but at an affordable price. Versus the Trooper, obviously we went all out. We're like, hey, let's take this concept and make it as beefy and as leatherful and like try to make a true wide toe box hiking and work boot style boot for under $300 that's just chock full of leather. And so you gotta pay extra for it, you know, like, because how much are the AR8s? So the AR8s are $209 and the Rugged Troopers are $289. So you're paying $80 extra to get all that leather, all those design changes, all the little features and benefits you roll in. And some people, they're like, I don't need those benefits for $80 extra. I'm fine with the AR8s. Some people are gonna be like, I want a true heritage work boot. I want all those features and benefits and values that come from all this upgraded materials and from the design that we've tweaked and changed, because that's what we were trying to make, you know, because nobody really made a true heritage boot with a wide toe box under $300. And that's what this ended up being. But there's some other things to consider too in terms of like sizing, because I've got little ankles and my cousin Jaron, you'd think we'd have similar size ankles, but he played soccer all growing up. So he just got big, like muscular calves and big ankles. And so we have polar opposite legs. And for him, the Trooper pattern being this more American style with the big gap up the front, it's almost too big of a gap for him. But for me, I love it because I can cinch it down really tight and I still have plenty of room. Sometimes the quarters touch, but I'm a little bit out of the average in terms of like skinny ankles. Versus Jaron, my cousin, who's got big manly ankles and legs, these fit him better because it's a bigger quarter. You got that difference in an inch across through here over the whole boot, and that quarter-inch here, and that little shortness through here. You know, that's a fit difference. So if you got huge legs, big old muscular dude, you might want to go with the AR8. If you're looking for an affordable heritage boot that you can work in, that's like $210, you might want to go with the AR8. If you want something that fits more like an American boot, that's built like an American boot, all those heritage values, about as high quality of a boot that Jim Green can make, that's what the Trooper is. And you know, it's not necessarily like, don't ever buy the AR8s, only buy the Troopers, because they do fill certain needs that either one doesn't necessarily meet. That's a terrible sentence, but you get the point. And so it's just cool to be able to deep dive on this and really show, even though it took like 12 different prototypes and we went back and forth for months and months and months, when you lay it out, there's a clear difference, but it's still only, you know, quarter-inch here, quarter-inch there, a slight material difference there, but it makes a significant difference in how the boots wear, how they feel, how they look, and that's the fun of this, because I've learned so much through just designing this and doing these design analyses and like really digging into the fine details to help me become a better footwear designer, help me to become a better actual reviewer, a more informed reviewer. So thank you guys for supporting these collaborations. It's what's made it possible to do all this. And it's cool that you guys trust us to really push the envelope when it comes to our collaborations. We're not just making the same stuff and like putting our name on it and like hoping to cash in on it. Like we are actually going deep into these designs. We're going back and forth for months and months and months to tweak it to until it's perfect. And so we couldn't do it without you guys' support, because you know, it's like these brands are gambling on these projects because we don't know they're going to sell, and we don't know if they're going to sell, or if they're going to be received well, if they're going to work. And so it's really cool to do. So huge shout out to Jim Green, huge shout out to the Rose Anvil crew, and you guys for supporting these, because it's really fun. And check them out below. So thank you guys. See ya.